So what is your opinion then on the IPPs and that type of business model? Do you think that they will exist in 10, 15 years from now?
I think realistically, as an investment proposition for solar makes sense in Spain now and will make sense in future if you are able to live with low wholesale power prices. So if we project forward and if we say, we project that power prices would be a band of, let's say, between 40 and 70 euros per megawatt hour for 20 years perhaps, you can say, what is the risk associated with a solar farm? The operating technical risk is very low. There may be, of course, an increased incidence of forest fires in southern Europe and more smoke. We've had fires in Greece, and who's to say that we won't have fires in Italy and France and other places? And more smoke would mean less production, but it's still not terrible. So the technical operating risk is very low. And the cost of replacing kit in the event of sort of calamitous weather or other damage is very low. So it's all about the power price. Now, because the technical and operating risk is low, the cost of capital should be low. So the question then is, how low do you think power prices might be? If I were something like an Enel or another big IPP, I would look at that and I'll go, my cost of capital should be 4, 5, 6%, depending to some degree on market. And I should be happy to invest my money on a very conservative power price scenario. And if I get more than that, it's upside. Maybe I share the upside with the developer, maybe I share it with the bank, but that should be a viable investment proposition. But then that means that solar moves to large deployments by people who have good relationships and understanding of the wholesale power market, and they invest on a low cost of capital, and any extra is upside.
We jumped ahead and we didn't touch on the new, upcoming Italian and Greek markets or the Netherlands and so on and so forth. What is your opinion on that?
Italy is, I believe, introducing capacity market auctions this year, which makes it more interesting because people will be looking at, can solar in some way tap into a capacity market, because this is the instinctive search for subsidy that the industry still always falls into, because we all grew up with subsidy. We always want a subsidy. I expect to see more volume deployed in Italy. People have built projects in Italy very successfully before. I built 85 megawatts north of Rome back in 2009, 2010. There's plenty of land. The Italians are not anti-solar, particularly if there's economic benefits associated with having it. And I see no reason why it wouldn't be built. I don't see a reason why. I don't see an enormous fundamental difference in Spain. I understand the wholesale power market is less developed. It's harder to sell your power or harder to sign contracts. That people will find a way around that. The development process will be a little slower. It will be a little more expensive. So Italy will deploy more solar. I think that's a no-brainer. Will people make large profits from it? Developers will make a profit now. Developers who have projects now will make a juicy profit on selling them to investors, but more people will come in and will develop more projects. So and costs will come down. So I don't think Italy will have a boom, as will Spain, for the next 5 to 10 years. But it's not going to be easy to make large amounts of money in it unless you're already there now with an established position. Greece will deploy another 2, 3, 4, 5 gigawatts of solar and wind. Again, the government is running an auction-based mechanism, so prices will come down, so people will make some money, but people will not make crazy money. Netherlands.
Should we be making though crazy money?
No one should make crazy money.
Exactly. I mean, why should we should be making a reasonable profit as an industry?
I agree.
But why should we? I mean, even on the development side, I've seen prices coming down to reasonable fees per megawatt. I mean, I remember back in the days we were selling 250, even 300,000 a megawatt. Now we are at 30, 40,000. I think this is for the risk taking. This is a very healthy profit to make.
No, I agree. And listen, back in Spain in 2007, you could make €1 million for having a counter DXS
here you have
for a megawatt. Yeah. Yes, the credit crunch changed that. The reason that changed, development fees pre and post credit crunch, massive difference. When I was in Italy in 2009, you could buy project rights for 150,000 per megawatt. And that was tapping into a subsidy of still more than €300 a megawatt hour. 2 years before, it was €1 million in Spain. The reason is that in Spain, pre-crunch, financing was perfunctory. Banks would lend 85, 87% of capital cost, yes, with almost no work. They'd say, hola, it is a solar farm, it gets the subsidy, have an 18-year loan. and it was perfunctory. The fees were low, the banks were keen to do it. In 2009, 2010 in Italy, the banks were terrified of lending to solar because of the Spanish experience, too much talk of retroactive change, and also the credit crunch. Banks were then extremely averse to doing debt of anything more than 8 years, and also just generally terrified of lending and trying to survive. Half the banks I was dealing with pre-crunch went out of business. The solar lenders were sacked, or the bank itself collapsed. So the availability of debt has an enormous impact upon the fees that a developer can make. People are making €100,000 a megawatt in Spain and Italy now at the top end, which is kind of juicy and will stimulate a lot of extra development, and there will be some backlash. Otherwise you'll cover the country in unnecessary solar capacity, and there will be a backlash. I think Greece will be relatively orderly. Most investors are still, or institutional investors still regard Greece with a lot of caution for historic reasons, and so that will slow the pace of development a bit. But people who do succeed in building projects and potentially then amassing portfolios if sentiment changes will make profits. It's not inappropriate for an industry to make money by anticipating a change of sentiment, taking a risk, and then that happens. That is how a market economy works. That's not crazy, and that's not triggered by the subsidy. That's triggered by changing perceptions of the market. Netherlands will deploy a lot of solar. I struggle to understand how they afford to pay so much subsidy. I know the Dutch are rich. This seems a strange thing to do with their money. I would have thought offshore wind was a more obvious solution.
Okay, and what is your opinion, Giles, on storage and batteries? There's a lot of discussion, a lot of hype. We see very few projects actually being deployed. Many of them are, research projects mainly. There is, a short-term, if you like, backing, especially in the UK from the national grid with short-term subsidies. So, what is your opinion? Are we going to see storage being a true enabler, and are we going to see changes in how the legislators are looking at storage? And do you think that is, for me, it's a natural progression, it's a natural continuation to have co-located projects, because then you can service the grid much better, and you can add services to a solar farm, and perhaps that's another revenue stream down the line. So what's your opinion on that?
Storage is a dramatically different business model. When storage was first mooted as a possibility, a lot of solar developers and entrepreneurial investors thought, excellent, storage will be the new solar. You could hold a half-day conference on storage. At the end of the UK solar boom, the subsidies for solar were being phased out, and 200 people would turn up, and you could have sold another 100 tickets, and everyone would sit there going, where's my 20-year contract, how do I get into it? That doesn't exist. It didn't exist then, and it certainly doesn't exist now. And in the UK, Ofgem has moved, for example, the capacity market is now suspended and storage has been derated. Triad avoidance doesn't work. National Grid indicated it would tender for a certain amount of storage capacity, which was at least 10 times oversubscribed. The other problem is you won't get a 20-year contract. No. Even if you could get a contract to do frequency response or balancing services for grid, if it's 4 years, you're doing well. But this is an asset that, if we think it's similar to solar, we should be looking at 20 or 30 years. So this makes no sense. Why would you build an asset and run a 20 or 30-year financial model if your contract only gives you 4 years of certainty on your revenue, and at the end of that, when you come to renew, you'll be competing against batteries that have had 4 years of innovation and cost reduction before they're deployed? It makes no sense. So what do batteries do? They do provide some benefits to the grid in terms of balancing fluctuations. I don't know how much the grid needs. I suspect it's not an enormous amount, given the amount that National Grid has been seeking to procure. It may be different in other markets, it may go up over time, but I don't think we're going to need sort of 10 or 20 gigawatts of batteries in the UK in a hurry. Batteries do have a role in time shifting. So if you can charge a battery during peak sunshine and low demand, and then discharge it in the evening when the sun isn't shining, that makes sense. But that's really only shifting. You need to be doing that a lot. You need to be cycling 750, 1,000, 1,500 times in a year.
It will kill the battery.
It will kill the battery, but that's the only way you make money on it. So if you don't cycle the battery very often, then you need to make an enormous delta in price. So that's difficult. Now, battery manufacturers know they have a problem. They will commit to buy your battery back for 4, 5, 10 years under warranty. So that gives you some underpinning on the cost, which means you can help get some debt. But it's going to be difficult. There is good news for solar and wind, in that the very existence of batteries, and assuming further cost reduction, means that as long as there is a delta in price in any 24-hour cycle, between when the sun shines and when it doesn't, or when the wind blows and when it doesn't, then there is an arbitrage opportunity for batteries. And if we assume that batteries keep getting cheaper, so cheap you have them on scooters and bicycles, yes, and are left on the streets overnight, if batteries keep getting cheaper, the cost of that arbitrage will get cheaper, and that will help smooth out fluctuations in price, which will help reduce the volatility of the power price faced by solar and wind and wholesale markets, and that will make it potentially less risky to invest in solar. So there is a potentially virtuous circle there. So as a solar investor, I applaud the existence of batteries. I think it's wonderful. I don't understand them myself. I think it's a different business model. It's for specialists in batteries, not for me.
But do you think it's just a matter of cost reduction and perhaps making the finance work, or do we need a technological leaping step forward in order to bring more efficient technologies in batteries? Or do you think this will be driven perhaps from the electric vehicle market, which will dictate the technology going ahead?
Electric vehicles will be transformational because they will increase electricity demand, and they are storage on the go. But whenever they're charging, they will be treated as time-shifting batteries, and people will look to monetize the ability of those batteries to store and provide grid services, which is a wonderful thing. It still doesn't make me any more comfortable investing in batteries or knowing where the whole cycle goes. Costs will have to come down.
Okay, excellent. So as an investment proposition or an investment advice, you would go in and look at markets like Italy and Greece with caution.
Yeah.
And you would see what the business models and opportunities are there. But also you would be a bit skeptical, if you would like to sum it up, with batteries.
Yeah, I think that for somewhere like Italy, markets where you're chasing merchant, you have to sort of work backwards from the solution. So what you don't want to do is commit to build something and then you can't get the bank debt. So you're going to go and talk to a bank first. You're going to say, I have an opportunity, I know how much energy I will produce, I know how much it will cost me to build, will you lend? The bank will say, that depends on your wholesale power contract, your PPA. So you'd have to go and procure a reasonably binding commitment of a PPA and get a reasonably binding term sheet from a bank before, as an equity investor, you're comfortable investing. Solar investing has always been very spreadsheet driven, and I don't think the traditional sort of P50 spreadsheet model really captures the impact of volatility. But that was fine when we had fixed 20-year pricing from government. With people should be running Monte Carlo simulations, people should be running P50, P90, P75, who knows?
So you would be more comfortable with a P90 scenario?
But this is what I was saying earlier about investing on a kind of worst case basis, but saying, for my worst case, I'm happy to have a low cost of capital.
So closing this very interesting discussion, Giles, tell us how do you see the future of the industry, and where do you see, if you would like, things going in the next 2 to 3 years? Let's not drive 10 years down the line, because it's nobody can predict what will happen.
Trends, new markets opening up. So I've been spending time in Taiwan recently. There are markets in Southeast Asia that are opening up. India is going like a runaway train, and anybody who's serious about volume should be thinking about how to engage with that. So there's plenty of scope to do more volume. Japan is expected to have an aggregate capacity of 150 gigawatts by 2030, I read. So lots more solar. In order to meet those deployment targets, people have to deploy in different models. It's not always going to be about 200 megawatts in a desert. It might be on a fish pond, it might be floating. Floating will be a big thing. It might be distributed rooftop. So people who want to, the volume will be available, it will be tougher, the revenue models will be more complex, the physical deployment will be more challenging, because you may have to settle for 1,000 units, 1,000 fish ponds, 5,000 roofs or something to get your volume. But that's fun, that's an opportunity. And so I see a lot of growth in the industry. I don't see the same crazy breakout profits we got from subsidised booms. The downside dangers are that the boom in solar deployment drives power prices down, but to be fair, people who are forecasting ahead on power prices are factoring in cannibalisation. So there was a rosy scenario, which I hoped has come to be the case, that with the end of reliance upon subsidy, and instead it becomes more about regulation and the rest, that we could actually have a long solar boom. As long as demand, bolstered by electric vehicles and transition away from thermal power generation and reduction in supply and increase in demand, keep pulling through the need for solar, the as long as we don't over deploy, we could be looking at many years of happy growth.
Yeah, I think that Bloomberg predicted about 320 gigawatts in solar deployment in Europe alone in the next decades.
Which is an opportunity for services. So as an industry, we've always focused upon, it's like a fire and forget missile. Build it and it becomes somebody else's problem. But now, with revenue models and becoming more complex, I think there will be an increasing business around technical asset management and management of data, and people who can really get the best value out of their assets.
Somebody said well, it was this very similar discussion in Munich a few weeks ago in a conference. Somebody says, I won't be here, you won't be here, so it's somebody else's problem. But that's not the right mentality to build upon. So, Giles, thank you very much for your time. Very insightful discussion, and I look forward for the next one.
Okay, thank you.